Introduction to Game Mechanics. There are so many game mechanics, it's difficult to list, much less remember all of them, but they're a vital foundational tool for better understanding the game. Mastery over core game mechanics will go a long way to improving you as a player. Game mechanics are built into the game and are not treated as effects. The simplest one that you should be aware of is the restriction of only having 3 copies of a card in your deck with the same name for cards not on the ban list. The reason this becomes an issue is that some cards have an effect that states that their name is always treated as the name of another card. Harpy Lady and some Umi cards in particular do that, and you can only have 3 total copies with that name. Other cards say that they are treated as another card while in the field or graveyard. They don't count towards your limit, since they don't have that name in the deck, but they also don't have an effect of the card that they are mimicking unless stated otherwise. Token monsters have a few mechanics. They cannot be flipped face down, they do not go to the graveyard as they simply disappear if they leave the field in any way, and even though some of them have effects, they are always treated as normal monsters at all times. Additionally, they cannot be used for Exceed summons, but they can be used for fusions, synchros, tributes, and link summons. Costs for cards are paid in full during activation of the card. Only one field spell can be active on each side of the field. If a player with one activates another, the first one is sent to the graveyard through game mechanics. It used to be that it was destroyed, but now it's just sent to the graveyard. As for the question of field spell being set, it is true that you can set a field spell. You take your field spell and set it in your field zone. You cannot set your field spell in a spell and trap card zone for much the same reason you cannot set a pendulum monster. That's simply not where it belongs. The rules book explicitly states that a field spells go in the field zone, and there is no restriction on setting them. If you already have an active field spell and wish to set one, first you send the active one to the graveyard, and then you set the field spell from your hand. While there is no obvious benefit to setting a field spell, there are 2 cards which take advantage of this, Set Rotation and Gear Town, of which Gear Town no longer works, because the first copy is no longer destroyed through game mechanics, it is just sent to the graveyard. Equip cards have a variety of game mechanics associated. First, they continuously target the monster they are attached to, and if the monster is flipped face down, leaves the field, or no longer meets the requirements due to a card effect that modifies something like the type, such as Zombie World, the equip card is destroyed due to game mechanics. Cards that have effects that allow them to work as a substitute for a fusion summon do not have their effect while in the deck, so they cannot be used as substitutes for a card that pull cards from the deck, like Future Fusion. They must be used as replacements for specifically named cards on a fusion monster, and it can only be used for a fusion summon, not a contact fusion. Pendulum monsters, in addition not capable of being set in the pendulum slot, are sent to the top of the extra deck, instead of being sent to the graveyard. A card that would interrupt a pendulum monster from reaching the graveyard, such as Macrocosmos, successfully disrupts it leaving the field and banishes it instead of sending it to the top of the extra deck. While a pendulum monster is on the extra deck, it is not treated as if it's in a card zone, and thus cannot be targeted by card effects that affect monsters in the regular zones. Infinite loops are not allowed if they create no net change, if they increase the life points of a player infinitely, since that is also considered a no net change, but are allowed if each loop creates some kind of change. For example, an infinite loop that takes away your opponent's life points is allowed, and when the change stops happening, the cards creating the loop are destroyed through game mechanics. If a no net change loop is activated by accident, play rewinds until just before activation and then proceeds. Public knowledge is available on every card, everywhere that is face up. If a card is face down, its numbers may be asked about, for example the number of cards in your opponent's main, side, extra deck, and hand, but not their identities. If a card is formerly public knowledge but is no longer face up, you are not entitled to any information other than its number, position, and location, just like with all other face down cards. It's your responsibility to remember the attack and defense of monsters that you might flip face down. If you ask nicely, your opponent might tell you, but they are not required to tell you anything whatsoever that is not public knowledge. It is your responsibility in a tournament setting to write down notes about what happens to cards. If you ask your opponent if a card they possess was flipped face down through your effect, and they don't remember, and neither of you have notes, it's your fault for not having written it down. It is your responsibility in a tournament setting to write notes about what happens to cards. If you ask your opponent if the card they possess was flipped face down through your effect, and they don't remember, and neither of you had notes, it's your fault for not having written it down. A judge cannot penalize your opponent for not being forthcoming about information if they genuinely do not remember. For game victory, you must reduce your opponent's life points to 0, or they must draw and not have any cards to do so, called decking out. If a win condition is reached due to a card effect, the duel ends immediately, without resolving the rest of the effect. If both players meet win conditions simultaneously, the game ends in a draw. There are many more game mechanics than are listed here. It's just an introduction to some basics. Please keep watching Senpie School for more in-depth game mechanics and interactions in future episodes.
Become a patron and support us today. If you like what you saw, like and subscribe below. Thank you. Okay, I'm done. That's all my excitement.
Okay.
That's all I had. Wait, MySpace still exists?
Copyright Yugioh Senpies. All rights reserved. Contact us for sponsorship and advertisement opportunities.